Hi, I'm Emily, and I'll be doing a psychoactive drug presentation, and the presentation is on nicotine. A psychoactive drug, if you didn't know, is a substance or chemical that affects the neurotransmitters, which are the things making connections in your brain. And it affects a person's thoughts, behaviors, and actions. And it affects these things because this is a non-natural substance. Nicotine isn't supposed to be in the brain, but since it has entered, it acts as other neurochemicals and it affects it in an abnormal way. So nicotine is commonly found in tobacco, and it's also isolated into other products like e-cigarettes, vaping, all that kind of stuff, regular cigarettes with tobacco. It's a stimulant, but it also can be a depressant because it also can relax your body at different doses. It depends on how much you take. If you take a lot, it's probably going to be a stimulant, but a little bit will give you a little relaxing kick. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about the short-term effects of nicotine. Immediately when the user inhales the substance into their lungs, it only takes like 7 to 19 seconds before it gets into the bloodstream, into the brain, which is crazy because a lot of drugs, it's like a waiting period of like an hour, 30 minutes. Nicotine, it's instantly. You feel the hit, you feel the euphoric feelings, and it stimulates these receptors called NACHRS. And these lie in the brain's reward pathway in the limbic system, and where emotions are regulated, and there's a rush of dopamine, which causes the feelings of euphoria. This activation of receptors leads the interneurons to alter the activity and plasticity in the pyramidal neurons. So the kick, that hit when you take the nicotine, it comes super quick as the nicotine stimulates the adrenal glands and causes a discharge of adrenaline, which stimulates the body. So adrenaline by itself is a natural chemical, but this stimulates that adrenaline in a non-natural way. In that moment, it relieves stress and improves mood, and it doesn't last long. That's why people become addicted and they need so much of it, because they'll wear off and they're like more and more. It's not a drug that lasts hours and hours, so it's easier to be addicted. It suppresses insulin output from the pancreas, causing smokers to be slightly hyperglycemic. High doses have the potential to affect your vision negatively, cause confusion and convulsions. The cycle of intake, like I was saying, and the effects are super quick, and this causes the user to continuously taking doses to maintain the positive effects. So each time you take a dose, you might need more because the dependency. Another short-term effect is the increased ability to pay attention and hold information in memory. The funny thing is, over the long term, these things actually fall in reverse because they affect the memory pathways and your ability to store information. So it's kind of like false when you first get that instant gratification. It's actually going to have problems later. So here I have a whiteboard, and I was going to draw a picture of the synapse, and the synapse is where the neurons come together. So we have one neuron end right here. I'll show it. You can't really see it right now. Okay, so basically here's the synapse. Here's one end of the neuron, here's the other end. And this is where the axon terminal is. So these right here, these guys, these are the natural chemicals flowing from neuron to neuron. But nicotine sneaks its way in here, and it looks exactly like these guys. So it's actually recepted by these it's called acetylcholine. That's the chemical that it acts just like. So the receptors can't tell the difference between acetylcholine and the actual nicotine, so it recepts both right here, and it goes right into here. And that's why your body is tricked into absorbing it into your system. and going to your brain. So it mimics that, and that activates cholinergic neurons throughout the brain. It stimulates the release of glutamate, which enhances the memory and learning, like I talked about earlier. It also releases endorphins, which is the natural painkiller, so that's why people get addicted sometimes. Okay, so moving on to long term. So comorbidity, that's a concept where if you keep taking one drug, you might be more prevalent to do another thing, or like a mental illness. So nicotine addicts tend to be linked, so this obsession, this addiction to nicotine tend to be linked with depression, anxiety, and anger issues. Its withdrawal symptoms include depressed mood, insomnia, irritability, anxiety, hard to concentrate on a singular task, restlessness, increased appetite, and weight gain. The long-term use can lead to the blockade of long-term memory, induction into the hippocampus, which regulates your memories and creates those neural connections. Constant use makes the person more susceptible to high blood pressure, which increases the risk of heart disease and cancer. Repeated exposure has been shown to make the dopamine circuit more sensitive, and many develop issues with learning, stress, and self-control. It also affects sleep. Long term, it can lead to lung cancer, chronic bronchitis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, increase of heart attack, stroke, heart disease, and aneurysms. During pregnancy, it can affect the baby by causing low birth weight, restricted head growth, stillbirth, placental problems, and children tend to have poor lung health. Repeated use can lead to tolerance, as I talked about earlier, and high doses are needed to yield the same effect. According to studies, this is absolutely insane. Between 1964 and 2012, 17.7 million deaths were related to smoking. And if the rates of uses were to continue, then about 5.6 million Americans below the age of 18 are predicted to die from smoking diseases. And I looked into e-cigarettes because I feel like that's like super prevalent in like adolescence, like everyone's into it, and like no one really understands the effects. They're just kind of hopping on board. But basically, a study from North Carolina found that 2 of the main added chemicals, these are often for like flavor and consistency, which are propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, are toxic to the body. And one of them is actually like a weed killer, which is like super sketch that you're putting into your body. Other chemicals like formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, and aceroline can lead to heart disease and lung cancer. It's been found that users who buy sweet flavors are more susceptible to forming a lifetime addiction, which kind of makes sense. It's like sugary drinks, sugary sweets. People are like super sweet crazy. It's like the same thing with nicotine. If you add the power of these sweets and the yummy taste with the power of nicotine, it's just like, don't go there. Just don't go there. And here are my reflections. Many people think of nicotine as a safer drug because it isn't as strong as like heroin or meth, but in reality, it's just as addictive and it can be just as damaging. People who become addicted need to constantly be intaking it. As it leaves their bloodstream, it causes an imbalance. So it is a quantity that can lead to severe problems and dysfunction if they can't access the drug. A lot of people who smoke deny that they're addicted and don't even realize the damage that they are doing. You probably know many people who vape or smoke, and it's like so sad to see that they're so reliant. Like they can't even function if they get the drug. They're like, please, please, vape. And you're like, whoa, like it's because they're addicted. They need the substance, they need the chemical being reinforced into their brain. 20% of all U.S. People in the U.S. smoke, which is very less than the past, but that's still like super scary. People with mental illnesses and living below the poverty line tend to smoke more than the rest of the population. And the thing that I found the most interesting was that a typical tobacco product contains over 4,000 chemicals, which are added to enhance the flavor and absorption. 4,000! That's not natural. I also read about how adolescents are more sensitive to the properties of nicotine, and they they can become more dependent on them at lower levels, making it super easy to get addicted. Thanks. And here are my sources. I wrote them down on the whiteboard. Thanks for listening.